Wikipedia describes tofu as a food prepared by coagulating soy milk and then pressing the resulting curds into solid white blocks of varying softness. It can be silken, soft, firm, or extra firm. We Resident Evil fans know that the best tofu is an extra firm tofu, so that it can survive as many zombie bites as possible, naturally. In this video, we're going to be talking about everyone's favourite lump of sentient bean curd. This is James for First Aid Spray, and this is 5 facts about tofu. 1. Why? I mean, it's a good question, right? How exactly did Resident Evil's most ridiculous bonus mode character come into being? Well, in many ways, tofu predates a lot of Resident Evil 2, at least in theory. The character model that we came to know as a thinking, fighting, and swearing block of flan started off as a simple, bare-bones character model used to test the game's collision detection, to make sure characters could move around the world and interact with obstacles, items, and of course enemies in the right way. But somewhere down the line, programmers at Capcom grew fond of the generic white block, and they coined the name Tofu after our hero's apparent similarities to the bean curd and milk-based snack. When it came to putting the finishing touches on the game, the developers decided to leave Tofu in as an unlockable extra. They already had an additional mode, the Fourth Survivor, starring Hunk, that would be perfect to add him to. And thus, armed with only a knife, Tofu and Tofu Survivor were born. 2. The voice. As a last-minute and somewhat silly addition to the game, Capcom didn't exactly go out of their way in finding someone to voice the heroic block of bean, and instead, when it came time to recording dialogue of their secret unlockable character, they picked someone internally. Programmer Katsutoshi Karatsuma supplied the voice of Tofu, and lended him a very unique dialect speaking a kind of Kansai that is generally local only to parts of Osaka, Japan, and nowhere else in the country. All of these voice clips of Tofu swearing and bidding the player farewell when he falls to the zombies were retained for all worldwide releases. When it came time for Tofu to don the beret once more for the 2019 reimagining of Resident Evil 2, Capcom did the right thing and reached out to Karatsuma one more time. Which, now that I think about it, means that Tofu is the only character in the game who retains his original voice actor. Nonetheless, despite not having worked at Capcom for at least a decade, Karatsuma returned to voice Tofu once again 21 years later. 3. Other appearances. When talking about Tofu in Resident Evil, it's easy to assume that most minds go to one of two things. The 1998 WWF match in which The Undertaker threw mankind... I don't know what came over me. Anyway, the 1998 Resident Evil 2, which spawned our beret-clad hero, or the 2019 reimagining, where he made his triumphant return. However, these aren't the only times Tofu has graced our screen. Another retelling of the Raccoon City event, Resident Evil The Dark Side Chronicles, features a cameo from Tofu, however, this time not as a playable character, but as an enemy. In fact, as almost every enemy. The unlockable scenario sees Claire facing off against a horde of undead bean curd, in a nod to the silliness that was the original Tofu Survivor. Elsewhere, Tofu also makes a major appearance in a piece of Resident Evil literature. Now, it's all non-canon of course, as all the comics spawned off the series are, but following the release of RE3, a duo of Chinese manhwa series were released. The first was a simple retelling of the game, but the second was a set of side stories about Leon, Claire, and you guessed it. In Biohazard 3 Supplemental Edition Volume 1, Tofu is framed as some kind of sentient umbrella experiment. My Chinese is a little rusty at best, so it's hard to tell what exactly is going on, but what we do know is, Tofu is dangerous. Apparently, if he's bitten by a zombie, the scraps of tofu that are pulled off of him can explode. Also in this comic, Leon injects himself with a G-Virus in order to turn to Goku S. Kennedy and take down another tyrant. So yeah, maybe we should all brush up on our Chinese so we can enjoy this comic. 4. Tofu in the code. As previously mentioned, Tofu's moment to shine was in the secret bonus mode of the secret bonus mode in the original Resident Evil 2. However, that's not the only PlayStation 1 RE title that Tofu is hiding in, quite literally this time. With a little bit of poking around by online modders, it was discovered that Tofu's character model is hiding in the code of the 1999 version of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Now, whether he was intended to be unlockable at any point is unclear. In all likelihood, he was probably used for the exact same purpose as he had been in the game's predecessor. Still, with a little bit of hackerman skill, you can get our beret-decorated bean boy into the streets of Raccoon City and finally have that face-off we've all dreamed of. Tofu versus the Nemesis. 5. Tofus Kin. Tofu was the last unlockable in Resident Evil 2, and offered the ultimate challenge to players. However, this wasn't the case in the 2019 reimagining, as beating the Tofu survivor mode with our very familiar friend surprised most players when it revealed that there was more waiting for them. For this new game, Capcom went all out with a variety of Tofu-like characters, all based on similar foodstuffs popular in the Eastern Hemisphere. We had Konjac and Wirimochi appearing after beating Survivor once, each with their own different loadout specialities, and then beating either of these runs gains access to flan and anin tofu. Who knew Tofu had such a large and apparently violent family? I guess when we get Resident Evil 2 Remake in 2032, we'll have another 5 exciting dessert-based chums to play with. And that's 5 facts about Tofu. Let us know what you thought and which minor characters in the series you'd like to see a video about in the comments below. Subscribe to stay up to date with all our content here at First Aid Spray. This has been James, and Nani Anel Hasejoda!